Now, long lines have been formed in Edinburgh as thousands of mourners are coming to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth at St Giles Cathedral. Her coffin will lie in rest there before returning to London ahead of her funeral next week. Tim Ewart is the former royal editor with the independent television network in the UK, and he joins me again live from London. Good to talk to you, Tim. Early morning, of course, in the UK, but we're starting to see people filing through past the coffin. It's a sad scene, but also uplifting. So many people wanting to file past and pay their personal respects to the Queen.
It is a sad scene, Chris. In fact, in Edinburgh, people have been filing past that coffin all night long. But it's interesting, you were just talking about the attempt to restrict the travel plans of foreign leaders who might be coming here. You know, they must come on commercial flights and they can't use their own limousines and so on. Clearly, that's going to be a problem. But what it reflects is the huge concern over the number of crowds that are going to be gathering in London over the next few days, because that is where the Queen is going to lie in state, and that is where her funeral will be held. And you may remember a few years ago, the Queen Mother lay in state, and 200,000 people wanted to walk past her coffin. The fear this time, it's not a fear, but the belief this time is that that number is going to be massively exceeded. So all these restrictions that are being talked about are linked in with security and logistics, and the police in London are facing what is probably one of their biggest operations ever. So it really is going to be difficult for them to make all this work, keep security up, keep the crowds moving, and hit all the schedules that they have to.
Well, that's exactly right. When you're talking about dozens of world leaders coming in, they obviously generally would travel in entourages, a number of cars, often security attached to them, getting around London, which is not easy at the best of times. This is going to be enormously difficult because presumably those crowds gathering around the city will also block a lot of the traffic flow.
Yes, I mean, for Londoners, it's just going to be a nightmare, to put it simply. They're already asking people who commute to work in London to think carefully about doing so in the days ahead, because the burden on public transport will be enormous. But somehow they have to move all these foreign leaders and all these foreign dignitaries, and there's going to be a lot of them from all over the world. There's a limited amount of space in Westminster Abbey, of course, where the funeral service will be held, about 2,000. So tickets are going to be at a premium, if you like. But somehow they've got to be able to move all those people, Joe Biden with his massive beast, as you've said, leaders coming in from everywhere. Somehow they've got to keep them moving around London and not allow them to get caught up in crowds, which would clearly prevent a security issue.
Yeah, exactly, which is obviously why they're trying to gather them together further away, put them all on buses and then only have one route to get them into. But the security concerns must be immense too, because it's one thing to protect those landmarks, to protect Westminster Abbey and the places and routes where the dignitaries will be gathering, but you're just going to have mass crowds all over London, right? So I imagine just a nightmare for the anti-terror and security forces.
Yes, and it's also interesting that there's a story going around about the transfer of the Queen's body from Edinburgh back to London, which is going to happen later today on a Royal Air Force aircraft. The original plan, we're now told, was that it would happen on the Royal Train, that one of the carriages of the Royal Train had been specially converted to accommodate the Queen's coffin. That plan was, we're told, scrapped about a week ago over concerns not exactly about security, but that such a long journey might attract unwanted protesters. And yesterday in Edinburgh, it was a tiny incident, but a lot of abuse was shouted at Prince Andrew as he walked behind his mother's coffin. And the fear was that if this train made a long journey south from Scotland to London, there could be problems along the way.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I thought I did hear mention of that train journey earlier. That explains why it's been switched to a flight. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim. I appreciate your insights. Tim Ewart there, who's the former royal editor of ITN.